is beautiful beyond description, and it had inspired poets and songwriters of all culture to produce admirable pieces throughout ages. In the Asian society with rich cultural diversity, there's also abundant collection of songs and poems on love and romance. In the Bible, the Song of Songs presents itself as a collection of love songs portraying the young love of the ancient Hebrews living in the hill countries of Ephraim. The objective of this paper is to read the Song of Songs with a special interest to, under, to understand it in the light of the Asian culture, particularly with regards to relationship, marriage, and family in the Asian context. The method that I will engage this is by using cross-textual examination of Song of Songs against some songs and poems in the Asian context on the themes of relationship, marriage, and family. And through that, I will attempt to demonstrate that Song of Songs can indeed be appreciated in a practical and natural manner as a spiritual reference to the pure and godly reflection of true love between a man and a woman as an alternative to the approach of allegorical reading of Song of Songs. The contents will be delivered in five sub points. The first one is unpacking the Song of Songs, and then I'll introduce you the heroine, Song of Songs, the Shulamite girl, and we'll go on the two major topics here with regards to romance and true love, and marriage and family, and finally the conclusion. Unpacking the Song of Songs. The Hebrew title of the Song of Songs, Shir HaShirim, literally means the best song of all, or song above all song. While the other commonly used English title, Song of Solomon, is likely to be connected with verse 1 of chapter 1 that suggests that Solomon is the author. This is a reasonable conclusion given that there is an Asher Le used in chapter 1, verse 1, which may be translated as that is written by. So, Shir HaShirim Asher Le Shalomo. Right? So, it's like it is that is written by Solomon. But it is possible also that Asher Le can be translated as which is about, or that is dedicated to, and in that manner. So has translated the verse as the Song of Songs that concerns Solomon rather than written by Solomon, suggesting that it may be a possible reference to authorship, but it may also refer to the commitment of another author to write along the lines and experience of the king. Or it might simply also mean, as Garrett and House suggest, uh, that the book is anonymous but sponsored by Solomon. Well, even if this is a compilation of materials, the title, A Song of Many Songs, is rather appropriate. Longman actually observed that the songs in the book it were dominated by the voice of a woman, suggesting that a woman poet may be involved in the project. One major interest in the study of Songs of Songs is the approach to interpret it. The conventional approach since after the first century has been the allegorical reading, that is, to read Song of Songs as an allegorical account of the history of the relationship between Yahweh and Israel from Exodus to the exile and beyond, or to interpret it as an allegory of the relationship between God and Christ and the church or the individual Christians. At a time when sexual expressions um, that that is very sensual are often linked with unholy and impure stuff. So earlier Christians had to forego the sensuality of the Song of Songs to focus on the spiritual significance for didactic reasons. Alternatively, there's also the dramatic interpretations of the songs, which focus on explaining the plot and the character in the story. There are many a way of looking at it. There is the three-character plot that suggests that the song actually concerns a story between Solomon, the Shulamite girl, and her shepherd boy lover. there's also the two character plot that involves Solomon and his true love. Whatever the case, these can have what we call counter suggestions as well. Um, Longman suggested that Song of Songs may be an anthology of poems um, about human love, intimate relationship, sensuality, and sexuality, which affirms the importance of love and sex and provides encouragement and a platform for frank talk about sex among God's people. I choose the practical and literary approach in this paper to read Song of Songs, placing the ancient Near Eastern cultural setting for the Song of Songs in line with the Asian culture on the subject of relationship, marriage, and family. I propose the following structure of the Song of Songs, dividing it into 6 songs. The 2 sections of Song 1 flanks Song 1 flanks Song 2, 3, and 4, in which Song 4 and Song 3 are being intricately associated. Song 2 begins after Song 1 and continue after the second rendition of Song 1, which conclude the first inclusio of the performance. Song 5, that you can see that I entitled it as The Shulamite Girl, comes eventually as if of a suspense, featuring the female lead in the song, The Shulamite Girl, just before the performance is ushered to its climax in Song 6, after the second rendition of Song 2. Uh, you know, when we talk about the Shulamite Girl, it reminds me of a famous song by a band, a song group called Smokey, by the name of The Mexican Girl. I don't know whether you have heard that before. Yep, let's jump to Meet the Shulamite Girl. Oh, I need to say something here. As a Malaysian, I try to attempt to refer to the song and poems in Chinese, Malay, and Tamil, which are the languages used among the major cultural group in the Malaysian context. But I just have to really admit that Tamil language is most unfamiliar to me, so I've only referred to materials that are translated to English. So I stand corrected if I have misunderstood the Tamil poems presented in this paper. So, Meet the Shulamite Girl. Interestingly, the heroine of the Song of Songs is only introduced in Song 5. This is somewhere in chapter 6 of Song of Songs, when there is this particular verse that say, "Return, return, O Shulamite, return, return, that we may look upon you." Who is this Shulamite girl? Besides the male voice describing the beauty of her body in Song 4, which is chapter 4, verse 1 to 5, that make us blush sometimes, the sensuality of the description, but very beautiful. Elaine would definitely agree to that. And so the the sketchiest portrayal of this Shulamite girl might be the signature verse in chapter 1, verse 5. I am very black, but lovely.
Dr.
Well,
Chong, sorry,
yep,
may I stop
so,
you?
sure.
Sorry, may I interrupt? Because I was thinking, I forgot to ask permission whether this session can be
Oh,
recorded.
okay. I'm okay.
Okay,
So how
can
about
we
the,
record? Okay, for our internal record only.
yeah,
Yeah.
sure, I'm okay.
Okay, thank
Yep.
you. Can you please, Hyan? So sorry. Yeah, please continue.
No problem.
It's
Yep.
already
So
recorded.
the signature verse that we would probably remember for Song of Song in 1-5, ESV translated it is, "As I am very black but lovely." I think I like the NRSV translation better. "I'm black and beautiful," because the actual word used, ver, is actually can be translated as "and" or rather than "but." The word black, shahor, in this case, or a number of scholars like Murphy, for instance, suggests that it's simply a color and is unlikely a reference to a racial feature. In chapter 1, verse 6, the girl actually claimed that the sun has made her swarthy or dusky, Shekakoreth, blackened her, darkened her when she was sent by her brothers to work in the vineyard, suggesting that the succor of her skin is not her natural color but a tan due to burn by excessive sunshine. Um, It is not my fault for being dusky, she cried. It is because of the work that I have to do for my family. Perhaps this is the way that the poet was drawing attention to his readers and audience to the natural beauty of a peasant girl who lives healthily under the natural sunlight. I like this girl because she is bold. She is so daring in voicing out what she feels. She may have disliked her dark complexion as a result of the outdoor life imposed by her family, but somehow her dark skin has marked her out, attractive in her own healthy way, comparatively darker than the other girls who live in more sheltered life. Incidentally, there is a Malay song, some of you might know this, that is made popular by R. Azmi uh, in 1954 by the name of Hitam Manis. It goes, Hitam Manis yang hitam manis, pandang tak jemu, yang hitam manis, pandang tak jemu. Black and sweet, oh, black and sweet, never tired looking at you. And this is my translation of Hitam Manis. The same struggle about what is and what defines beauty perhaps is shared in the ancient society of the Shulamite girl and the Asian society. Inevitably, skin color seems to be a subject of contention where beauty of a girl is concerned. So in Song of Songs, the Shulamite girl sang cheerfully for being beautiful and black. In Hitam Manis, the male singer expressed his adoration of his sweetheart, whom he described as black and sweet. In both instances, the poet called for an alternative assessment of beauty, where dark color of the skin, perhaps a symbol of social class for the Shulamite peasant girl who had to work under the sun, and a racial marker in multiracial Asia, could be regarded as a signature for beauty for any healthy and cheerful girl. Romance and true love. In the song one uh, and song two, it signals the Shulamite girl longing for love and her fantasy for romance. She is infatuated with the shepherd boy. In verse 7 of chapter 1, she cried, Tell me, you whom my soul loves, where you pasture your flock, where you make it lie down at noon. It is like she wants to go and look for her shepherd boy lover and spend time with him at noon. Flirtations and subtle expression of these intimate moments with her lover, such as let him lead me to the banquet hill and let his banner over me be love in chapter 2, verse 4. And my beloved spoke and said to me, Arouse, my darling, my beautiful one, comes with me. Titillating, it follows, following the girl's revelation of love and fantasy. The passionate pursuit of love, so depicted, hardly reflects the stereotype of women in a male-dominated ancient Near Eastern society. Murphy suggested that these teasing portrayals of romance may be construed as a wish or a simple fantasy, is probably not real, with the girl designating her fantasized lover as the king in chapter 1, verse 12. In reality, a peasant girl in those days would more likely be keeping her love in her heart, whispering lyrics like chapter 1, verse 7 to herself or bashfully to her female companions. Likewise, in the traditional Asian values, love is a secret only to be shared among the growing girls, is or subtly disclosed in songs and poems. In a poem entitled On the Excellence of Rain in the Tamil classic Thirukkural, the female character delicately expressed her affection for her lover. Women's eyes savor your every line, but mine would embrace your broad chest. Very bold expression of fantasy for romance, but yet I think in truth, in reality, they wouldn't be really be able to voice that out verbally. There are songs in the Chinese classics like Longing of Spring Breeze in Taiwanese. Uh, correct me if I'm wrong, Glengo. I'm not a Hokkien, Bong Chun Hong. Okay. in Taipei depicted a young girl's crush on a handsome lad and secretly yearning for a relationship and marriage. There's also the Cupid's Arrow, 爱神的箭, which is sung by Zhou Xuan in Shanghai, which exposed the secret yearning for love and romance of young men and women, with the chorus artfully describing the immortal encounters of the two sexes. In most instances, love songs and poems brought into open the real feelings of young men and women, which is inhabited by social perceptions. These are, however, genuine emotions, as true love between a man and a woman leads them toward a sacred and praiseworthy union. It is most probable that Song of Songs, like most love songs and poems in the setting of traditional societies in the ancient Near East and also Asia, are not stories about true characters. For the Shulamite girl could represent all women under the condition of concealed love and passion in any conservative society, including Asia, where women are expected to take a rather reserved position in relationship and romance. Incidentally, amidst all this explicit acknowledgement of desire for love and romance, the poet of Song of Songs include warning against lust and promiscuity in relationship. This is seen in the repeated caution directed to the daughters of Jerusalem, often offered after the obscure description of sexual intimacy. Daughters of Jerusalem, I charge you by the gazelles and by the does of the field, do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires. This reflects the general ethical sentiment on personal sexual purity in the ancient Near Eastern society. Similarly, in Asian values, premarital sexual relationship is morally unaccepted in general, and faithfulness in relationships and marriage is a highly respected value. Marriage and family. In Song 3, I name it All Night Long, is often regarded as a description of the dream of a lovesick Shulamite girl. In chapter 3, verse 4, the poet wrote that when the girl found her lover in her dream, she brought her to in my mother's house to the room of one who conceived me. Some may take this to mean that the girl intends to have sex with her lover in her mother's room. Everybody is above 18 here, right? but but I tend to agree with Garrett and House that we can scarcely imagine that a decent Israelite maiden would drag the man she wants to her mother's home for a night of sex. This idea of mother, it is noted, Murphy noted that mother, Imah in Hebrew, was mentioned several times. Chapter 1, verse 6, chapter 3, verse 4, chapter 6, verse 9, chapter 8, verse 2 and 5, suggesting the certainty of the role of the mother to the girl as a genuine guide, protector, counselor, such that the mother's house, the Beth Imah, would be a safe place for her to bring the man she loved. In view of the coming of Song 4 about the wedding and the marriage life of the girl, the mother's bedroom in chapter 3, I would think, is more likely to be the indication of an arrangement of marriage. Has supported the notion by referring to how Isaac brought Rebekah into the tent of mother to arrange for marrying the girl. Note, Beth Imah, the mother's house, is only mentioned one more time in the Old Testament in Ruth, chapter 1, verse 8, which also refers to the idea of shelter and protection. In the Asian setting, family has a very important role to play in the arrangement of marriage. Often, I think we know, those of us who got married, you still remember you have to go to your fiance's house to go and ask for the hand in marriage. Asian men would go to the woman's house to seek permission from the woman's parents to marry their daughter more often than not. And although the father of the bride-to-be may have the final say of approval. The mother of the bride-to-be is a significant influencer. So like the case of the Shulamite girl, acquaintance with the girl's mother would definitely be a wise step for any Asian man before official meeting for a marriage arrangement. I view Song 4, the union of love, in chapter 3 and chapter 5 to be a poetic rendition of Shulamite's girl wedding and her sexual union with her husband. Very quickly, basically, I just like to suggest that in chapter 3, the Solomon and King Solomon that is used here is actually a metaphor used to refer to the bride. Surely it is appropriate to celebrate the once in a lifetime event of a man and woman by honoring them like a king or a queen. Similarly, poetic motions can be observed in a Malay wedding. I found a Malay poem for a Malay wedding from the blog, which goes like this. Tunduk segala rakyat jelata, memberi takzim Raja Gahari, Raja Rupawan di atas takhta, duduk memberitah barang sehari. In Malay wedding, is customary for the Malay people to refer to the bride and groom in a wedding as Raja Sehari, the king for a day. In a wedding banquet, the relatives of bride and groom would entertain themselves with responsive poem recitation, berbalas pantun. One side would recite a poem and the other respond with another. A poem like this one might be recited by the groom's party, and the bride's party might come back with this one. Tuan Putri tersenyum-senyum melihat Laksamana bermain adat. Senyum-senyum jangan tak senyum, sudah sempurna segala adat. The subsequent song 4 is interesting and fiery. It appeared to me like this is probably the description of the loving sexual encounter of the newlywed. The section from chapter 4, verse 1 until chapter 5, verse 1 is probably depiction of the first exposed encounter of the couple. They saw the body of their lover for the first time, and the groom praised the beauty of his bride in chapter 4, verse 1 to 7, from her specific parts of the body, from her eyes and hair, her teeth and lips and temples, her neck, her breast, and concluding finally with, "You are altogether beautiful, my darling. There is no flaw in you." And reciprocally, in chapter 5, verse 10 to 16, the female voice sang similar tune in admiration of the body of her lover. Dobbs also recognized this kind of poetic form as wasaf, a borrowed Arabic term which means description, which are often used to describe the physical appeal of one's lover. And in the context of the songs, according to my proposed arrangement, I perceived several subtle suggestions of the moments of sexual intimacy after the wedding. Chapter 4, verse 6, chapter 5, verse 1, which artfully and artistically suggest the kind of a sexual union and my perception. In Song 6, finally, now I've found true love. This is the grand finale of all the songs compiled in the Song of Songs. The male and female lead sang together with friends, repeating some lines from the earlier songs as they celebrate their true love. The brothers of the Shulamite girl, remember, they forced her to go to work, right? So the brothers of the Shulamite girl finally recognized that their sister had grown up and blessed her for her marriage. If she is a wall, we will build towers of silver on her. If she is a door, we will enclose her with panels of cedar. The girl in the Song of Songs found true love with the support and blessings of her family and friends, and she would need to sustain the marriage built on true love with the support and blessing of her family and friends. In the same manner, family and friends are important also for young men and women in Asia to find and sustain true love in their relationship and marriage. In conclusion, I present the case for the alternative of conducting practical and natural reading of Song of Songs as an alternative of reading it as an allegory of the relationship between God and his people and Jesus and the church. Of course, we can still do that. Right? And taking this practical and natural reading approach, we can appreciate the open expressions about the true love between a man and a woman in the Song of Songs and the good values of family and marriage in the human community that is pleasing to God. And not last but not least, as an Asian reader, through practical and natural reading of Song of Songs, I observe relevant lessons for Asians in line with Asians' values. With that, back to you, Elaine.
Thank you, Dr. Chong, for the very stimulating research. I myself is in the research of Song of Songs, and I find it very engaging, and I almost like want to have a dialogue with you sometimes in SDM. But then today, we have a responder. So let me introduce her, Dr. Tan Yi Yan. Okay, our colleague also in the Old Testament in SDM. She is the Assistant Director of Center for Bible Engagement, Alumni Relations Officer. As you can see from the screen, she graduated from TTC, MDiv, and then Princeton, MA, and then Luther Seminary with a PhD. And she is with the Lutheran Church in Malaysia. And currently she is teaching Old Testament with a very focused teaching on Old Testament prophets, okay, and also teaching Hebrew. So Dr. Tan Yi Yan will be responding to Dr. Chong's paper, and it's over to you. I stop share, and Dr. Tan Yi Yan, please.
Okay, hello everyone. Am I clear? Is my voice clear enough? Okay, great. Well, thank you, Dr. Chong, for a very complete reading of the Song of Songs, because you went through, from the first song till the last, and you brought us through, first verse till last. And when I take a step back and reflect on your paper, I can see that you're doing a cross-cultural reading. So of course, the Song of Songs is an Israelite poem, and Dr. Chong is reading it through Asian lenses. And as he reads in his paper, he finds resonance between the culture of the Song of Songs and our East Asian culture. And so culturally, we are in a culture that is more reserved when it comes to expressing our love, and not just our love, but our sexual desires. That's very taboo. And I appreciate that Dr. Chong mentioned that the songs, those words, those very expressive words, bring into the open real feelings of young men and women, that they may not be able to speak so publicly, but this is how they actually feel deep down, their true emotions. Now, I'd like to explore that a little further. And taking our reserved culture into account, I just want to draw out feelings from the songs that we don't usually talk about. Now, the one thing that we need to remember is that there is mutual desire between man and woman. So of the verses that were cited and the entire poem, it contains a female voice and a male voice. And there is mutuality between these two. In fact, the female voice can be attributed to 60 to 75% of the book. So it's a very female-dominated book, which is very unlike a book of the Old Testament. And the woman speaks more than the man does. And what does she speak about? She speaks of her own desires for her lover and for sexual intimacy. So earlier, Dr. Chong had also mentioned, in his observations that women probably cannot speak openly about such things. And I think my question is, can a man speak openly about such things? I don't know. I suppose it's very cultural. But in the book, the woman is very open and honest and transparent of her own desires for her lover. Now, our reserved East Asian culture is reserved in general, But for women, it is even more so. In many cultures, not just East Asian, we expect women to be demure, to be shy, to be reticent, and generally to be passive, while men are expected to take initiative in courtship. So take marriage proposals, for instance, in modern day. Modern day marriage proposals today are considered to be a male domain, though not exclusively so, right? So when a woman takes initiative, right? Maybe I should ask, like, how many of you here are married? And when you got married, who proposed? Did the man propose or did the woman propose, right? And I think most of the time, when we see photos of a marriage proposals, always the guy who is proposing, right? And when a woman takes initiative, they are perceived to be, oh, so aggressive. Oh, so forward. Oh, that woman is so direct. But when a man does so, he is perceived to be, oh, so romantic, an ideal lover. And so society has so conditioned the gender role in love and lovemaking that a woman should not be the subject of desire. A woman shouldn't have desires, but only being the object of desire. Only a man should desire her, but she shouldn't desire a man. And that is somehow societal expectations, whether openly or inwardly, but definitely in public, we somehow do not expect a woman to so openly, propose or take initiative or make pursuit, So so that is a little bit different, I feel, in the Song of Songs, because the woman has autonomy in the Song of Songs. She loves as well. She has desires as well. And she has a desire for her lover, and she takes action. She also pursues. And now I want to take us to Song of Songs, chapter 3. Verses 1 to 4, and I'm just going to read it quickly. This is in the female voice, and listen to how the subject of these verbs are the woman. Upon my bed at night, it helps that I'm a woman, so, I sought him whom my soul loves. I sought him, looking for him, but found him not. I called him, but he gave no answer. I will rise now and go about the city, in the streets and in the squares. I will seek him whom my soul loves. I sought him, but found him not. And then the sentinels found me as they went about in the city. And I asked them, have you seen him whom my soul loves? Scarcely had I passed them when I found him whom my soul loves. I held him and would not let him go until I brought him into my mother's house, which is the verse that Dr. Chong cited earlier. I held him and would not let him go until I brought him into my mother's house and into the chamber of her that conceived me. I just want us to read this beautiful text of her longing for her lover. And so a woman is able to give such expression. And then comes verse 4. This leads me to another discussion now about bringing her lover, holding on to him and bringing the lover into her mother's house. And there was a comment from Garrett and House. Now, Garrett and House are both men, Dwayne Garrett and Paul House. And I had to go and look for what they wrote exactly, right? And I cite from Dr. Chong's presentation, Dwayne and Garrett's, what did Dwayne and Garrett write about this particular verse? That we would hardly imagine that a decent Israelite woman would drag her lover into her mother's house for a night of sex. And I was like, oh, how uncool, even though this is their imagination, but it's so uncouth after this beautiful poem of very honest longing of holding on to her lover. But this is Dwayne Garrett and Paul House's imagination that, Oh, a decent Israelite woman would not drag her lover into her mother's house for a night of sex. So maybe there should be more women interpreters on the Song of Songs. Now, the thing is, I agree with Garrett and House's conclusion about the meaning of the mother's house. The mother's house, many commentators have taken it to mean that this woman who holds on to her lover and brings him home is making a public declaration of her love. She wants to bring him home to a family. It's also very Asian, you know, we bring our boyfriend or our girlfriends to meet our family, to express our intent, like, you know, we are serious about our relationship and we want to get married. So it is a case of that. And so mother's house, I agree with Garrett and House that it means that, you know, she wants to bring him home for a public declaration of love. But it just interested me that, you know, they would imagine that this, you know, the way they describe their imagination. So anyway, I mentioned earlier that the Song of Songs, you know, depicts mutuality between both genders, and I hope that we can uphold that when we read the Song of Songs. But I also want to acknowledge that there is also evidence of patriarchal societal attitudes within the songs, right? And so two examples of that is that, you know, she is under the control of her brothers, and they make her work at the vineyard. And also later in chapter 5, she goes out to look for her lover, and she meets these security guards, these watchmen, you know, who harm her, who, you know, the text is that they beat her up for some reason, probably thinking that she was a temple prostitute. So there are some of these patriarchal evidence as well within the Song of Songs. But I think the songs also should help us to reevaluate some of our cultural assumptions related to gender. Our talk today was a lot about resonance that we find between the songs and our culture. But I also invite us to think about the dissonance between the songs and our culture. Are there any dissonances between the songs and our culture? And one dissonance that I hope that we can uphold is how the Song of Songs has given voice to the honest feelings of a woman in love at such a high aesthetic level. There's a beautiful poem celebrating the woman's love for her lover, and this lover loves her in return. And both man and woman can talk about love and desire in the poems very openly and very honestly. And I hope that perhaps that is one dissonance that we can hold on to and reflect on how we can talk about love and sex healthily in our modern context. So this is my response. Over to Dr. Elaine.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ian. Very interesting response to Dr. Chong's paper, especially the part from the, how to say, engagement from a female perspective, not necessarily a feminist perspective, but a female perspective, which is interesting. So I just want to ask whether Dr. Chong, you would like to respond to Ian's response to you? You can if you want to. And at the same time, I also invite those who are in the Zoom, you can forward your question in the chat room, in the chat box, so that we can see the time. But 3:30 sharp, we are going to jump over to the next presenter on New Testament. But then if you have any question or dialogues, interaction, you can do so in the chat room. At the same time, I invite Dr. Chong, okay, to, if you want to, no compulsion.
Just want to say thank you to Ian. Thank you so much for actually reinforcing the idea that is what I was trying to bring through, that there is mutuality, definitely, that men and women, we can actually openly talk about love and sex in a healthy manner, because that is really what is the beauty that is God has ordained. I like the way you put it, like, so you know, if we focus too much on female not being able to be open about it, can male be very open about it? Well, it kept me actually thinking, gee, can we? You know, sometimes you being naughty, you do, but can we actually openly talk about it? And, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, I really appreciate the way you will try to bring out the beauty in the poetic rendition of a just a sincere yearning for love that brought out. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yep.
Thank you. So I saw that, oh, we have two chats. Dr. Victor Lee is responding. Nowadays, the Korean BB cream makes people so white. So responding actually to I am black and beautiful, or I am black but beautiful, depending on what version. Huh? I actually agree with Dr. Chong. I mean, I agree with the idea that I am black and beautiful could be a possibility of interpreting the word. Okay. And Josephine Tan type that sex means different things to men and women. To a woman, it isn't just a physical act. Yeah, okay. It's all about the. Sometimes there are so many imaginations, even dreams. Some interpreters will interpret the dream scene in the Song of Songs. Okay, so okay, Dr. Victor Lee, you have a question, right? You want to ask by unmute yourself, or you want me to read out? How does the I'm reading out anyway. How does the Song of Songs speaks to the theology of body as in physical body? Or perhaps we can both presenter, responder can actually communicate or have a dialogue with Dr. Lee.
Yeah, I seriously, I don't see the direction of Songs of Songs directing attention to the theology of body per se. I think the theme is more about love, true love, and relationship between man and a woman. But having said that, looking at chapter 4 and chapter 5, there is surely a kind of a very vivid description of the body that tells us at least that we should not be ashamed of our body. It's not made for us to be ashamed of it. And because of sin, we sort of uncovered ourselves and we feel shameful about it. But when a man and a woman in true love, in union, face one another, I think that is the most beautiful thing of all, that there's actually no need to be shameful about it in that sense, which tells us that, that's what Genesis say, when a man joins a woman and they are both naked and they don't, don't feel shameful, things like that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I find Dr. Chong's paper especially engaging when talk about cross-textual engagement, cross-textual hermeneutics, and I find it refreshing and also exciting when you quoted some Chinese and Bahasa poems to be part of your interpretation. And I want to can I, if because I don't see any more question, can I ask that because in the past, for so many years in the life of churches, we interpret the Song of Songs as if that it is the love between God and his people Israel, or the love between Christ and his bride, the church. But your interpretation, however, actually it's another perspective, which is actually quite more and more scholars in the Old Testament, especially in the scholarship of the Song of Songs, have adopted too. I mean, reading it literally. So how would you then, when you have this position of reading it literally, historically, how would you respond to people from the church who say, no, it is about the love between God and people, God and Israel, or Christ and his church? Okay.
I remember when I first go to Princeton to study OT, one of the first things that I read about OT is that the Old Testament is very fluid. It is very open for us to actually have more thoughts about it. And in other words, it's very flexible for us to go, and it is so it's so economic that we are allowed to make to put our feelings in it and try to understand it. I don't think we need to brush aside that allegorical reading approach. We can still do that. Even just now when Ian was reading chapter 3, talking about how the girl was so affectionate about I look for him and I can't found him, and when I found him I hold him and can't let me go. I think that would be a pretty good and very powerful reflection too if we are thinking about ourselves looking for our Lord Jesus and finally we found him and wouldn't let him go. So I think there's value in that approach of reading as well. I'll definitely not brush it aside. Um, in my paper, my purpose is to just to suggest that there is this alternative that we can consider by natural reading it and apply it in our life with regards to relationship, marriage, and romance, yeah, family.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Chong. What about I ask opinion from Dr. Tan Yen? The same question applies. The interpretation,
Mhm.
you know, whether the traditional interpretation, traditional perspective that the Song of Songs is about the love between Christ and the church, or God
Mhm.
and Israel,
Mhm.
as do the
Well,
literal reading.
yeah, well, we know that once upon a time, the early church fathers like read it allegorically, and that is part of our history and also part of our heritage to read it allegorically. But well, it's just that today in our scholarship, maybe because of the way that we are taught, we are taught to take it at face value in that, it is very clearly a love poem. And also because there have been more studies in our generation than in the generation of the early church fathers. Now we have done, we have found much more literature in ancient Near East and also in Egypt. And we have found so many love poems in this style, in all of these other cultures, that we can safely conclude that they were most probably, love poems and not written allegorically by the first by the early writers. And so so we kind of like train to read it according to its historical context, the context that formed the composition of this literature. But yet, the allegorical reading is still part of our spiritual heritage, and we still read it, and it is part of our history because the early church fathers read it that way. So I wouldn't throw it out of the window, but it is there sometimes for us to reflect on, and for our devotion sometimes. And I think Dr. Chong's interpretation earlier is a very good example of how we could reflect on that text too in that manner.
Okay, thank you. So we actually have 2 minutes. Is there any follow-up questions? You can unmute yourself, but a short question will do among the participants in this Zoom.
Maybe I can share something from my class.
Sure.
This is something from my students. After studying the Song of Songs and noticing that, the woman's voice is so strong, they proposed and they felt that perhaps the Song of Songs was written by a woman. Yeah. So in the earlier part of Dr. Chong's presentation, we were talking about composition and who actually wrote the poems. So it is possible that a woman was one who wrote most of the poems.
Okay, that's also interesting. Thank you. Actually, the Song of Songs is also, has also become a rich resources for feminist interpretation as well as cross-textual engagement. Some very good interpretations has come out with regards to Song of Songs with a very creative interpretation. So I foresee that we are going to have more conversation on Song of Songs, and perhaps in future, publication of a book which gather all the papers related to the Song of Songs, gearing towards the interpretation, which is literal interpretation. Okay, so we are almost time for our next presenter. Once again, I want to say thank you to Dr. Chong, despite your busyness, and also despite that you are recovering from your loss of voice, but you still managed to deliver the paper effectively and also clearly, with such clarity, and also this engagement of scholarly research. We appreciate very much. And also Dr. Tan Yen for your time. in reading and also responding to this paper of Dr. Chong this afternoon. Thank you so much. Okay, may I share screen? Okay, our next presenter. Okay, for the next paper, Reverend Dr. Lim Ka-yong, who is also not a stranger at all. Okay, Reverend Dr. Lim Ka-yong had held many portfolio in STM earlier. He has been the director and later the dean of STM Postgraduate Studies until 2022. Dr. Lim Ka-yong has been a lecturer in New Testament studies and then later senior lecturer in STM until presently. And currently, Dr. Lim Ka-yong is the director of Diocesan Theological Education of Diocese of West Malaysia Anglican Church. Dr. Lim Ka-yong is a prolific writer, publishing mainly in the area of New Testament studies. Okay, Dr. Lim Ka-yong obtained his PhD in New Testament in the year 2007 from University of Wales, Trinity St. David, formerly University of Wales, United Kingdom. And prior to this, he also obtained his MA in New Testament from Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary. So perhaps I wish I know more about the recent publication or the research that Dr. Lim Ka-yong is working on so that I can give you more introduction. But nonetheless, we will let Dr. Lim speak for himself. And later, after Dr. Lim's paper, I'm going to introduce the responder. Okay, over to you, Dr. Lim.
Thank you, Elaine, for your introduction. A very good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for joining us on this Friday afternoon to listen to both our papers presented by Dr. Chong and also myself. The significance that you will see in both our paper is that I'm more of an academician, so I don't have fanciful PowerPoint slides for this afternoon. And I'm just going to share my paper with you. And so this, what you see on your screen is a paper that I've written on what I would like to share. But I will not be reading all the paper. I'm just going to highlight some of the significant arguments that I'm going to present forth. Should any one of you be interested in my paper, just feel free to drop me a note. I'll be happy to share it with you. Now, the topic that I'm trying to reflect on is on a verse taken from 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 3. Let me read to you this verse. Perhaps I'll read from chapter 5, verse 1 to give us the context. Now, brothers and sisters, about times and dates, we do not need to write to you, for you know very well that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. While people are saying peace and security or peace and safety, destruction will come on them suddenly as labor pains on the pregnant woman, and they will not escape. So here we see a very interesting phrase that used by Paul in chapter 5, verse 3 in the 1 Thessalonians, when they say peace and security. So this is the part of the a phrase mentioned by Paul that I would like to give a little bit more reflection. Now, what is interesting, as you can see in my introduction on the screen, is that when Paul refers this phrase, peace and security, he did not specify who this group of people were that were saying peace and security. In fact, if you look at the Greek verb, there is no subject mentioned. It merely say, they say, when they say. Now, what is interesting is that throughout the history of scholarship, the earlier scholarship tend to read this from a prophetic tradition, that the peace and security most likely refer to Jeremiah chapter 6, verse 14, and Ezekiel chapter 13, verse 10. But however, in the last 2 decades, there is a shift of seeing this phrase peace and security as a Roman slogan, partly because of the rise in interest in reading the New Testament from a political or Roman imperial perspective. One of the most assertive statements is the statement made by Wright, N.T. Wright here, where N.T. Wright mentioned that peace and security, as we know from various sources, was a standard imperial slogan, with the empire posing as a kind of a global protection record. We give you peace and security, you give us money and obedience. That seems to be the current consensus in New Testament scholarship, where most scholars believe that this phrase is a direct reference to the slogan by the Roman imperial authority. Now, this position has been challenged quite recently, particularly from a scholar by the name of Joel White. He has questioned this line of interpretation. And this is where I come into the picture. And I would like to suggest that we might have to consider 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 3, from a slightly nuanced perspective. More so, if you look at the context of 1 Thessalonians, if you look at 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, Paul deals with the issue that there are some believers who have passed away. How do you deal with that? And then come in the phrase, peace and security. And after that, Paul talks about the day of the Lord, a very strong eschatological statement about the day of the Lord. So peace and security appears right in between of the death of the brothers and sisters in the city of Thessalonica and the assertion of the eschatological hope that believers have in Christ. So that's where these verses come in. So I like to argue in this paper that we need to make that connection between what comes before and what comes after. Now, so let me just highlight briefly the context of 1 Thessalonians, as you can see on your screen. I'm going to read a portion of this section. Now, after Paul's evangelistic visit to the city of Thessalonica, there was some success despite the apostle experiencing some form of great opposition in the task of proclaiming his gospel. Because of Paul's mission, a group of Thessalonians believed in his gospel. And I think this is very important because Paul mentioned in 1 Thessalonians chapter 1, verses 9 to 10, he turned to God from idols, to serve a living and true God, and to wait for his Son from heaven, whom he raised from the dead, Jesus, who rescues us from the wrath that is coming. So this is already an indication in 1 Thessalonians chapter 1, verses 9 to 10. There is a direct reference between the death of the Thessalonian believers and the day of the Lord, the second coming of Jesus. Not long after Paul's departure, the community encountered some devastating experience. They endured some form of persecution. And because of this, Paul sent Timothy to the city of Thessalonica to find out about their condition and to strengthen and encourage them so that no one would be shaken by these persecution. And so Timothy returned from his mission and reported to Paul the encouraging news about the steadfastness of the Thessalonian Christ followers in their faith, and also the distressing news that some members of the community had died. And so this sort of formed the background why Paul wrote 1 Thessalonians. Now, in this part of the paper, I want to deal with two issues. First of all, is who is the subject of legosin? Who is subject that Paul mentioned? They say, when they say, who is this they? Now, one observation, as I mentioned earlier on, in this line of the interpretation where you take the Roman imperial cult into serious consideration, is that it often assumes that there is a uniform practice of imperial cult throughout the Roman Empire, without accounting for the possibility that there could be different ideologies or practices in different regions and cities. Now, Clint Barnett recently pointed out that this approach is methodologically flawed when applied to the Thessalonian context, where evidence outside the city is cited to support the argument about imperial cult in the city. So basically what Clint Barnett says is that if you look through the scholarship of Weimar and White, what they did is that they draw evidence outside the city of Thessalonica and then read it in the context of 1 Thessalonians. And that's why Clint Barnett said, no, we got to look at the evidence, the archaeological evidence that we can find in the city of Thessalonica. And so what Barnett did is he did extensive study on the evidence of imperial cult, and what he comes to a conclusion is that there are a number of selected Judeo-Claudians, which means Caesars ranging from Augustus right up to Nero. There was some honor and benefaction given to them. But interestingly, the worship of imperial cult is not exclusive. You just don't worship the imperial cult, Caesar, as God only, but you incorporate the worship of imperial cult into your existing religious rituals. That means to say, whatever god that you worship, you just add on the imperial cult. And this is what Barnett says here, and I quote, "The cult of the Roman benefactors were wedded into the cult of the gymnastic gods. If the statue from the archaic temple is Nero, his cult may have been embedded in that of Zeus, Roma, or both. And Augustus' cult was incorporated into the cult of Roman benefactors, as well as that of Hercules and the personification of Thessalonica." And so what Barnett was saying, that if you look at the context of the city of Thessalonica during the day of Paul, what you see is that people still hold on to their traditional religious belief. They just add on the worship of imperial cult, that Caesar is Lord, Caesar is the savior, Caesar is the son of God. And he also further argues that the imperial cults in Thessalonica were one of the source of persecution and social harassment that were carried out against the Christ followers there. And this is where 1 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 9 and 10 come in importantly here. By turning away from idols to worship God, as proclaimed by Paul, the Christ followers essentially turned their backs on two important pillars of the city that guaranteed the success and well-being of the city: the gods, the local worship, and the imperial cults. So what happened in Thessalonica, what you see is that in order to ensure that there's peace and security and there's economic success in the city, you worship whatever local patron gods, and you add on the imperial cults. So these are the twin pillars of the city. You abandon this, you're basically abandoning the benefaction and the blessings from these gods that you worship. And that forms the background for the Thessalonian Christ followers who have abandoned these idols and to turn to worship the one true God. So when this happened, right, the non-Christians or the pagan in the cities begin to accuse the Christians, saying that, hey, look, you abandon your own culture, you abandon the gods that we worship. So when you do such thing, remember, you are threatening the peace and security that we now enjoy in the city. You are basically putting the entire city into jeopardy. So essentially, that's what Clint Barnett has been arguing, that what Paul's mean when the Thessalonian believer turn from worshipping idols to the living God. Now, when that happened, there is also a possibility that the gods that you abandon might cast his wrath on you. And this is where Buckley comes in quite interestingly. Buckley suggests that the mistreatment carried out by those outside the community, those who are not Christians and defined as social harassment, was simply because the people has abandoned worshipping the idols. And as a result, this God that you have abandoned may have pronounced wrath on you. That's just what the pagan believe. And this may also lead to martyrdom. That's why Paul addressed in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 that there are other, the Thessalonian believers have already passed away. Could possibly be a result of persecution, could be a result of martyrdom. And this is where I cite Buckley again here. Buckley says here, "It is certainly remarkable that so soon after the introduction of Christianity, more than one death has occurred among the small band of believers. At the very least, it will be easy for non-Christians to mock their faith in a savior who had failed to save them from death. But we may also imagine non-believers finding the close temporal connection between conversion and death more than coincidental. Greek mythology had more than enough stories of God who struck down impious individuals, and such events were rumored still to occur. At the popular level, the anger of the gods were a reality never to be ignored. And so Buckley suggests that the readiness to attribute natural events to the direct intervention of the gods should not be underestimated. Therefore, the death of Christ's followers must have been a rather well-known fact to those outside the Christ assembly. And the cause of death could have been speculatively attributed by outsiders or pagans to the wrath of gods as a form of punishment for turning away from idols to worship a living and true God. Right? So who could this local community, when they say who could be the they? Now, interestingly, Richard Ascough proposed that within the context of the first century world, most likely the people who had mocked the Christian could have been those from Greco-Roman associations. Why? This is because if you live in the first century Greco-Roman world, you cannot detach your life from the Greco-Roman association. Just like for us, if you're Chinese in our local context here, you have your different associations that you belong to. You have your family clan, like my name is Lim, so I have my Lim association. You go to Penang, you have the Ku Gong Si, so you have all those sort of clan associations that you belong to. Then at the same time, you also have associations related to your profession. You have what we call in our context here, Persatuan Tukang Besi, for example, if you're a silversmith. You have association for traders in the market. You have the Pasar Malam Association. So we belong to all those sort of associations. And this is where Richard Ascough's theory is quite interesting. He argues that if you look at the Greco-Roman associations, all of them would have a patron god. So if I belong to this particular association and I turn my back away from them and to worship the one and true living God, I'm actually abandoning centuries worth of traditions that we have held on to. And by doing so, we are encouraging wrath of the gods that we have been worshiping for generations. Now, when you look at this, I think for many of us who come from Asia, we can immediately see there is this connection. When we do evangelism, oftentimes we have people saying, oh, I'm very fearful of my gods I've worshipped for many years. Or when the family become Christians and we have to remove idols from the family, there's always this fear whether would this God that we used to worship punish us for for throwing away all the statues of the idols. So this is a kind of similar context that I propose that Paul is also facing among the community back then. And this has been further reinforced by a recent essay written by Bruce Longenecker. He examines the possible reason for the death of some of the Christians in Thessalonica. And he attributed also to the punishment and wrath from the gods that they have abandoned. And this is where he says that in the context that best explains the death encountered by the Christ follower in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. These deaths were taken as a godsend by the leaders of the parent association, who were especially invested in denouncing the newly established Christ assembly. According to this narrative, the death of the Christ followers is a direct result of them proving to be impious transgressors and offenders of the good news of Roman peace and security. Such transgression would have evoked the wrath of the deities, which resulted in the death of the Christ followers. And this reading further supports Barnett's argument that the imperial cult need not be isolated as the only reason for the peace and security referred to 1 Thessalonians 5:3. And Longenecker's reading suggests that the provenance of this phrase, peace and security, in Thessalonica would have included both the imperial cult and the deities of the local associations that these Christ followers in Thessalonica used to worship. Now, when you take these two into consideration, I think there are several implications for reading First Thessalonians. Right? And I'd like to suggest this, based on the recent work of Barnett and Longenecker, a more nuanced understanding of the provenance of the phrase arena and peace and security becomes clear. While not discounting the Roman imperial cult could have been in view, it is not to be isolated as the only source for this saying. The possibility that the ambiguous group of people promoting peace and security could have been the different local groups in the city of Thessalonica, including the Greco-Roman associations. If this saying in 1 Thessalonians 5:3 is intimately connected to the death in the Christ assembly and also to the persecution of social harassment experienced by them, it would then help us to reconstruct the situation behind Paul's letter. While there is less certainty that martyrdom was a direct result, although it's possible, it does not diminish the fact that the pagan community would have viewed such death as a direct punishment from the various deities that Christ followers abandoned. This has serious implications for the Christ followers who have raised doubts or uncertainty of the status of their loved ones who have departed. When a group of Thessalonians responded positively to the gospel proclaimed by Paul during his visit to the city, we can read that in Acts chapter 17, they turned to God from idols to serve a living and true God and to wait for his Son from heaven, whom he raised from the dead, Jesus, who rescues us from the wrath that is coming. This decisive act of the Christ followers resulted in different local groups, they could be association, family, other social groups, reacting adversely to their change of religious beliefs. There was pressure for them to abandon their faith or loyalty to Paul's gospel, and a series of social harassment followed. In the midst of this unpleasant experience, a number of Christ's followers died, whether due to martyrdom or other causes remain uncertain. These deaths were interpreted by the pagan as a result of the wrath of deities the Christ followers abandoned. This caused further distress among the Christ followers as to the question of the status of those who died. In their despair, Paul responded in order to give hope, addressing their doubts and comforting them in their suffering in this fascinating letter of 1 Thessalonians. Paul assures them that the same God whom they turn to is the same God who raised Jesus from the dead. And this God will also raise their departed loved ones. And what is even more encouraging to the Thessalonian Christ followers is that Paul claims that those who have died will be given privilege in the sequence of events when the resurrected Lord's return with triumph. They will be the one first to meet the risen Christ, then followed by those who are alive. By doing so, Paul seems to be honoring the dead as a response to the shame that the Christ followers experienced when the pagan alleged that their loved ones suffered shame, a shameful death as a result of the wrath of the deities they abandoned. When those who insisted that the Christ follower must recant their faith or abandon their loyalty to God, Paul's gospel, in order to preserve the peace and security of the daily life of the larger community and not to evoke further misfortune or wrath inflicted by the deities, Paul pronounces the eschatological judgment on these pagans, that when Christ returns, they will eventually suffer the wrath of God, which the Christ followers would be spared. And finally, in this letter, Paul reminds the Christ followers that rather than placing their trust in the peace and security advocated by the pagan, it is the God of peace himself, as Paul says in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 23 to 24, who calls them. And this God is the one that is faithful, that will keep them sound and blameless at the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ. So that's just the gist of my argument for this paper, where I hope to make a better sense of the phrase mentioned in 1 Thessalonians 5:3 when they say there is peace and security. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lim Kayong, on the paper on this New Testament passage. May I share screen? Let me introduce the responder for this paper, Reverend Dr. Victor Lee. Reverend Dr. Victor Lee, also not a stranger to most of us, because he is also the principal, or they call it president, okay? But to us, it's like principal, I mean, our term equivalent. The president of Bible College of Malaysia. Reverend Dr. Lee has been the president of Bible College of Malaysia since January 2017. He is also an EXCO member of the Assemblies of God of Malaysia and a council member of the National Evangelical Christian Fellowship, NECF. Okay, Reverend Lee holds a PhD in Divinity from the University of Aberdeen, Scotland. His thesis was published by Lancome Monograph in the year 2021 with the title Reading Johannine Dramatic Irony Through Ancient Dramatic Devices. Okay, so as you can see from the screen, the rest of the qualifications, including MTH from TTC, denominations, area of studies. So we have a New Testament scholar responding to a New Testament scholar. So Reverend Dr. Lee is also, how to say, very actively and involved in supervision and teaching, supervision of thesis and module paper of STM among our students, postgraduate students as well. So without further ado, may I invite Dr. Lee
Thank
to
you.
respond?
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you.
Mm.
Sorry, my voice is not very clear, just like your principal. I don't know what happened. All our principals' voice are being hammered. Well, thank you for the opportunity to respond to Dr. Lim Kah Yong's paper. Thank you, Dr. Lim, for bringing our attention to revisit the historical background of Paul's phrase, Eirene kai asphaleia, peace and security in 1 Thessalonians 5:3. First, I think the question may be, why is it important that scholars continue to discuss that seemingly minute nuances behind a short phrase, just 3 Greek words, right? Peace and security. Now, the reason is due to hermeneutics. By uncovering the situation in life, the background of the believers in Thessalonica in the first century, we may then interpret the phrase closer to the authorial intention. And the difficulty lies in reconstructing the historical context due to the scarcity of data from the first century world. And hence, New Testament scholars need to use social theory, whatever available data, to reconstruct the background from the ancient writings. And so here, Dr. Lim's paper seeks to clarify the plausible background to the phrase peace and security. Dr. Lim critiques the prevailing scholarly consensus that the phrase was taken as a direct reference to a Roman imperial slogan. Now, Dr. Lim, in his paper, unfortunately, you don't have the chance to read it ahead. I did, so I can go and give you more context to it. Dr. Lim actually begins his paper by surveying the scholarship, and he identified 2 major interpretive proposals, and then afterwards offer his proposal as a third view. Now, I'm going to present it in this way. So the first view, I'll say the first camp, okay? The first camp reads peace and security as an echo to the Jewish prophetic tradition. Here are 3 examples of the false prophets mentioned in the Old Testament that proclaim peace when there was no peace. Jeremiah 6:14 says, I'm reading in English Standard Version, they have healed the wound of my people lightly, saying peace, peace, when there is no peace. Ezekiel 13 verse 10, precisely because they have misled my people, saying peace, when there is no peace. And because when the people builds wall, these prophets smear it with whitewash. Micah 3:5, thus says the Lord concerning the prophets who lead my people astray, who cry peace when they have something to eat, but declare war against him who puts nothing into their mouth. Now, these are some of the passages that scholars use to say, perhaps Paul was citing this with this passage in mind, alluding to the peace that the false prophets mentioned in the Old Testament, and now in a similar way, there will probably be people then say the same thing, and therefore God will judge them. Now, Dr. Lim argues that this prophetic sorry, my computer kind of hang now. Just give me a moment. That's the problem with nowadays technology. Okay. Now, Dr. Lim argued that this prophetic background is possible, but it's unlikely for two reasons. Number one, Paul does not use his usual formula for citing Hebrew scripture. Instead, Paul points to this group of people, the undefined group. They say Legosin. Who are they, right? So there seems to be a specific group of people rather than his usual way of just citing things. So, which he then implied probably referring to some people in Thessalonica. The second reason is due to the language itself. The prophetic tradition only mentions for peace, but say nothing about security, whereas the phrase that was mentioned by Paul here in Thessalonians is peace and security. There are two words there. So on that note, I agree with Dr. Lim that the parallel is not apparent from a linguistic perspective. But I do find that the echo of the concept seems very strong. The motive of deceptive peace preceding judgment permeates the Old Testament prophetic tradition. Even the word security was not used. The idea was actually implied, for example, in Ezekiel 13, verse 10 to 16, where the influences of false prophet are likened to whitewash a wall with illusions of security, which will collapse under divine scrutiny. And moreover, in the immediate context, Paul was addressing the unpredictability of the day of the Lord following Jewish apocalyptic teaching. So I find that it is hard to imagine why Paul would not allude to Jewish prophetic tradition when he's talking about eschatological issues where it is filled of Old Testament apocalyptic motives. Okay, anyway, that is for the first camp. Now, the second camp, the second view on this phrase, peace and security, is to read it as a Roman political slogan. In Latin would be Pax and Securitas. Now, this view among scholars have become the dominant view, as Dr. Lim pointed out. It is what you find in the commentaries nowadays, when interpreter reads the text and with the social-political background of Thessalonica as the free city, enjoying the prosperity of Romans. Now, the Romans took pride in their Pax Romana, where the language of peace and security is found in various artifacts, ancient artifacts and writings. Now, this view is further strengthened by the conflict between the early believers and the Roman authority concerning the proclamation of Jesus as Lord rather than Caesar. As such, Paul is taken here probably to address Roman propaganda of guaranteeing peace and security that believers should not trust. Now, that is the second camp's reading. Now, Dr. Lim's critiques of this camp by pointing to Joel White, which he mentioned just now. The significance is that Joel White concludes that there were no particular distinct slogans such as peace and security, or at least in that form, peace and security, exist after examining all the available historical evidence. The ideology of Securitas was actually a late idea. It was articulated during the reign of Emperor Nero. And so Dr. Lim have rightly exposes that the peace and security, to read it as a Roman slogan, seriously lacks local evidence, or at least not in the city of Thessalonica. So the concept of peace and security were commonly found in ancient writing, but not necessary as a slogan. Now, aside from lacking local historical evidence to support Roman slogan reading, I point to Nijay Gupta's critique. I find Gupta's critique was equally relevant. Gupta points out two significant problems with reading peace and security as a Roman slogan. Number one, the present situation in the Thessalonians, with the concerns over death in the community, contradicts the worry of the believers falling into the Romans' promise of peace and security. I mean, in this case, the Roman can't even protect the people from dying. Moreover, if the Romans were the cause of their death, why would them making this offer of peace and security be relevant? Would they even put their trust in them? And number two, Gupta point out that Paul introduced the phrase by pointing to they. That this is the main point of contention. Who are they? Which means some people knew the phrase. So it's not what Gupta say, a free-floating slogan. Who are these people? In the immediate context of 1 Thessalonians 5:2, Paul warned the believers not to be like those who are doomed for destruction. And these people who are doomed for destruction would most likely be local persecutors, which means they may not necessarily be the Romans or any particular cult per se. Okay, so I think Dr. Lim's argue in a similar fashion. For the needs to read 1 Thessalonians 5:3, we need to consider its immediate literary context, and particularly to the persecution of the community. But unlike Gupta tends, after he argued for that, and then he said better follow back the first camp. For Dr. Lim, no, he proposed to refine the second camp theory instead. So Dr. Lim persuasively argues that prior scholarship has often isolated chapter 5 verse 3 from the letter's pastoral core. The purpose of 1 Thessalonians was to encourage believers in their persecution, and I quote him, in their persecution and comforting them to the recent depths in the community by drawing hope from the hope of the perusal and the coming judgment, end quote. As such, the interpretation of chapter 5 verse 3 must align with the larger framework of the discussion in 1 Thessalonians. Dr. Lim then turns to the subject of Legosin. They are saying, who are they? Now, he rejects the idea that they are the proponent of the imperial cults only, since there is no evidence of such practice in Thessalonica. Dr. Lim then draws the findings from Bernard and reassess the cause of the persecution of the Thessalonians. Based on the evidence from Thessalonica, it seems that the ideology of the imperial divine honor was integrated into the religions and politics of the city. Hence, not the imperial cult that persecuted church, but all pagan religions, perhaps, that honor the Roman emperor for his blessing over the city well-being were part of it. And so Lim postulates that those who are saying peace and security are probably those association from the pagan neighbors, local surrounding communities, who find Christianity as a threat to the prosperity of the city. Excuse me, just take some sip here. Excuse me. So if you follow this paper, after establishing that the say of peace and security comes from all these pagan neighbors, Dr. Lim then link this finding to the severe persecution of the Thessalonians. Now, why would the pagan neighbors strongly persecute the believers while at the same time promising peace to security? So then Lim links this idea to divine wrath. The pagan neighbors would have attributed the suffering and death of the Christian to the wrath of the deity. In Chinese, we say 歹死, you caused the problem. No? You get up from your religion. That's why God punished you. So Dr. Lim, in his article, he kind of surveyed even from Paul's own writing and then the Greco-Roman religious practices drawing in from the scholars, and find that it is common that these associations from those deities tend to link up people who kind of quit their religion with divine punishment. Now, the death of the Thessalonian believers would have probably been perceived by their pagan neighbors as an act of God or their gods, and consequently become a point of distress of the young church. Imagine you are young believers and you've been converted, and then you hear your neighbors telling, see, these people, they give up their previous God. Now they die one by one. See, now God punished them. So the church also become worried, is it true? Is these people dying because of that? And so with that, Dr. Lim's interpretation therefore provide a very logical explanation for the concerns of the Thessalonian believers about the death of some members and the need to resist the promise of peace and security, because to them, it's like, come back to us, then you will avoid all these things. And so Paul will have to address, don't go back to them. So rather than pointing to the imperial cult The pressure probably come from the local pagan neighbors. The believers were probably afraid of divine punishment from their pagan gods. Some might abandon their newly found faith in Christ in order to preserve that so-called peace and security of the larger community. And Paul therefore responds to this concern by reminding them of the actual reality of the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ. And the rest you can read in the letter. In conclusion, I find Dr. Lim's paper to be reasonable and compelling. He has highlights the need to consider local evidence and provide a fresh perspective on the social and religious dynamics the Thessalonian believers face. And Dr. Lim's nuanced approach offers a compelling alternative to the Roman slogan hypothesis and enriches our understanding of Paul's message to Thessalonians. I would like to conclude by offering 3 points for our further consideration. Number 1, the subject of Laodicean remain undefined. Perhaps we can also think about people within the community of faith, because throughout the whole discussion, it's always thinking about external outsiders. I'm thinking about the reading, like for example, Sion Kim, who argue that perhaps believers in the church have misunderstood the tradition of Jesus, and therefore they have a misunderstanding about eschatology and so forth. Would it be a point for us to consider perhaps Paul was not just dealing with outsiders, but there could be an issue of fragmentation, just like in Corinthian, within the church that perhaps espouse a realized eschatology that they are trying to mislead the church, and therefore causing all this unrest, and therefore promising peace and security and so forth. I'm just throwing out ideas, okay? Number 2, while the background of peace and security remain uncertain, I find that the prophetic tradition should not be omitted entirely as a lens to read 5:3. The false sense of security, of course, could be a cause from the social religious issue, but as Paul put it in this form, it is an eschatological one. And so Paul would have not shift his apocalyptic hat as he discussed this issue, even though it is something that is happening in the church. So I would suggest an offer that perhaps in dealing with this text, there could be more than one layer of interpretation needed. And finally, number 3, this is more of a interpolation based on Dr. Lim's reading. If we were to follow Dr. Lim's reading, how does it affect our understanding of eschatology? Now, this is in particular for those who hold on to a rapture view. I come from the Pentecostal background. Many of those people hold on to rapture view. And this text has been used as their favorite text, holding to how God will rapture people, and in the last day, in the tribulation, there will be this false promise of hope, So if we were to follow Dr. Lim's reading, which means the text mainly says actually an occasional event. So then how does it affect us pastorally, especially those who hold on to that version of eschatology? Okay, so that's all for me to respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Lee, for your very actively engaging with the topics and which has been presented by Dr. Lim Ka-yong. So to these 3 suggestions, would Reverend Dr. Lim Ka-yong like to respond as well? Over to you.
Thank you, Victor, for a very thorough response to my paper, which is essentially a work in progress. And thank you for highlighting the additional 3 considerations. Now, I have thought about whether there could be people within the community of faith that may have said these words. Perhaps the only thing that hold me from going down that line is the fact that in verse 3, Paul actually pronounces judgment on them. Destruction will come upon them suddenly, and that was the one that hold me back. if it is within the community of faith, is Paul also pronouncing judgment on people who believe and all? So that's one thing that is the only thing that holds me back for considering the possibility of people within the community of faith that could have said that. Yeah, I take your note on the prophetic tradition seriously. And I think one of the side, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 20, do not treat prophecies with contempt, but test them all. Maybe I should take that into consideration. And I will do so. Yeah. And I'll rethink about the prophetic tradition and how that would work in my paper. I think I have a couple of thoughts that can be worked through it, and I will be certainly happy to consider that. And thank you for raising the point of our understanding of eschatology. Although I didn't mention about rapture directly, but it does raise certain issue for us to think about it pastorally. And thank you for highlighting that. I greatly appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay. So can I also, like, this time we open up this platform for question and answer or continued dialogue between Reverend Dr. Lim and Reverend Dr. Lee. And can I also invite those who are present here, our colleagues, scholars, New Testament, we have 2 more, okay, and also our principal, Dr. Tan Yen, if you are interested to engage in dialogue in this discussion. Okay. And for the rest of participants, if you are shy to unmute yourself, you can also put forth your question or your discussion in the chat. Okay, is there anything, Reverend Dr. Lee, that you would like to further engage in dialogue with Reverend Dr. Lim with regards to what he has said moments ago?
I personally find that the whole revisiting of the reconstruction of first century world is something that we need to keep on doing. There's a tendency for students who study New Testament assumes that what you read in a textbook is done deal, as in that's how the first century looked like. But as you can hear what Dr. Lim says, we are basically building hypothesis, and all these hypotheses build one over another. So I'm not so much of a response, but I think that this is where I would like to encourage more people to study the New Testament. It's not a done deal yet. There's so much to research on. There's so much to spend, and also on to appeal. Since we have at least 52 people here, consider creating scholarships or putting more funds into library. We really lack of resources. When I'm preparing my response paper, I'm trying so hard to find the resources with accessibility from my library, but it's very hard because what books that we have might be just too outdated. Yeah. Someone is saying something just now.
No, actually, I'm saying
Oh, okay. I thought I hear some word. Yeah.
Okay. All right, there are time and also ways for you to share your thoughts. Dr. Jong, is there anything from you?
No, I remember when I go and take up New Testament theology, my second semester, my advisor tell me, "You're so daring." So for us to do OT, NT is kind of out of bound. I think I'm not informed enough to engage in very intellectual discussion here. But thank you so much. I mean, I was very interested by Sikayong's title paper. I mean, it looks like a very trivial issue, but it seems that there's so many things that we can still fathom and think through it. Thanks, Victor, also for the encouragement to say that this is not a stopping deal yet. There's still a lot more things to learn, actually. Yeah. Dr. Ezra Kok.
Yeah, okay. If I may just ask, thank you, Kayong and sorry, my dear friend. New Testament studies has always been very, very minor details. at times I find that we are like splitting hairs. Yeah, we do need to do the sort of detailed studies as much as we can to construct or reconstruct the historical situation. I mean that I do value that. But may I just push you one more step? So what? If you locate that, I mean, for example, who spoke the word that is peace and security? If it is from the Christian community, so what's the problem? If it is from the outsiders, officers, representing the emperor cult, or is from the neighbors or hostile neighbors, so what? I mean, I'm just asking the question. Having read the Bible, I was still I'm getting more and more interested to ask the question: what are the significance? So what's the problem? Would you like to expand on that, or you want to wait for later and see?
Hey, thanks, Ezra, for that. Yeah, although I did not expand or spell it out specifically in my paper, I sort of hinted it in my presentation earlier on, that I think for us coming from Asia, living in a very religious context where there are many, many, many gods. For us, our apologetic is which God. It's not a defense of the existence of God. God is just everywhere. And I think it's also have implication for us when we think about reaching out, doing evangelism, or how do we encourage people who come from that sort of background, and after they become Christian, in the event that there is this sort of fear towards the deities that you used to worship, or is there pressure from a family of their own community? Oh, you do this one, like what Victor said, God will punish you. So I think there's sort of little relevance for us to consider that particular angle. If you look at it from the scripture perspective, hey, this issue that we talk about in our context today is nothing new. Paul had to deal with it, and I think we can find much more comfort. And I think for Paul, the emphasis on the eschatological hope is something that we should not neglect as well for us. And sometimes it's so easy for us to forget our eschatological hope. And I've always say that once we have a very firm eschatological hope that this is Christ will come again, how would that affect us in the way we live our life today? I think that is also have some sort of bearing. That would be just my short response. I do intend to develop that small little portion in my paper later on. I hope to work this towards a publication, and that certainly will be added to it. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything Dr. Lee and Dr. Kok want to further
just want to add
engage?
to what
Right.
Ka Yong have said.
Mm.
This chapter 5 for many Pentecostals, or shouldn't just lump Pentecostals, those who read it from a more dispensationalist point of view tends to see everything is only in the future. There's a tendency to do that, and so they forget there's an immediate reality that the Thessalonians are facing. So if we were to read this following what Ka Yong have said, or whether it's in church people, insiders or outsiders, but the people who are saying this is not during the tribulation period, then they will come and promise you peace and security. They could be anyone. I mean, in the first century, it was those people back then. It's a real human flesh and blood. And then if that is the case, then pastorally, this kind of promises can remain to be given to us today. We still feel the same kind of tension in our society. So you don't have to wait for so-called the tribulation period, then only to anticipate all these kind of challenges and then wait for the rapture to take place. So I think one of the implications is that, yeah, all these minor things kind of add up, because the systematic theology is built from those minor things and put together. And if you're not careful, then you may override those minor things, and then using those your framework to kind of squeeze into the text. Yeah, that's the danger of it. I'm just biblical scholar speaking here. Yeah. Ezra, I think you have something else to say, right, Dr. Ezra? I thought it was that's the first question.
Yeah, Dr. Kok.
Actually, not much. I mean, I'm just trying to see. I mean, yeah, I agree. I mean, Gayong did sort of engage with that pastoral issue. I think for me, especially now, the New Testament is not written in the context of happy days, but actually full of challenges. So if you can locate, at least you can locate the Thessalonians letters in a context of not so friendly, that will make a lot more sense for us to talk about eschatology or whatever. Paul definitely is very pastoral, dealing with some very burning issues there.
Thank
For
you.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Kok, Dr. Lee, and also Dr. Lim. Actually, for every seminar presentations like this, actually what I personally look forward to is the discussion among the scholars. That's another way of learning because from these interactions. So I thank very much Dr. Kok, Dr. Lee, for this engagement with Dr. Lim Ka-yong on the same topic. And before I ask the principal, Dr. Chong, to close us in prayer, may I also announce something, the updates from the Postgraduate Center. We usually organize public seminar or public webinar like this. So this round, today and tomorrow morning, we have two. One just finished, and which is, I believe, is well attended and also very engaging. And tomorrow morning, if you are familiar with Chinese medium, then you join us for another round of biblical study seminars. We have the same two presenter, two responders to a topic in Old Testament and New Testament. And last month, the Postgraduate Center, we also have public seminar in Kuching. This is over. We try to organize as often as possible, at least once a year, so that we can further encourage scholarship among faculty and also among colleagues, among students, postgraduate students, to participate, to learn from this interaction of scholarly engagement. Okay, so the new thing in STM is that we have this Master of Theology in a modular mode. I mean, the learning mode is different from the usual one we have. The usual one is we engage with the supervisor, one supervisor or two supervisors to one student, the research-based MTH. We are introducing gradually, Master of Theology in modular from this Center of Postgraduate Studies. What makes modular unique is that we will have a cohort. Okay, I mean, a group of students study together in a class. It could be a small class like 5 person or to 6 or 7 persons on the same subjects of study interest. For example, New Testament. Okay, and then put all the students together and then complete the 6 modules on the same pace and reach the thesis writing almost at the same pace and then complete the program. And if we find it effective to bring together students like this, because some students, they need to have this condition or the environment where they are stimulated to learn together with their peers. Okay, so right now, this year I am pilot running. Although I don't got pilot running, but I'm having one group of students who actually study with me on Old Testament theology, even this semester. So have been running. And just happening yesterday was the Master of Theology in Anglicanism just launched, signed the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, between STM and Diocese of West Malaysia, where Dr. Lim Ka-yong play a crucial role in overseeing, organizing this program in Anglican Church. If you're interested, contact us. Okay, contact Haiyan and Chiu Yi for further information. Okay, and we'll guide you to the registration, to the person in charge. Okay, for the Master of Theology Old Testament Studies, it has already taken place where students okay, are in the same class, but this is I'm teaching Chinese classes. So those are in the Chinese speaking circle. If we have almost a similar amount of students, we can begin another Master of Theology, for example, New Testament studies next year. That is in our plan, but we are going to run it gradually so that we won't be like having too much to handle. In order to bring our operation to effective running, we actually have partnership. So our partnership program is with the Anglican Diocese of West Malaysia for one, and the Melbourne School of Theology another, and also Oxford Centre of Religion and Public Life. So right now we have these three active collaboration parties are working with us side by side closely. So today, our seminar and tomorrow's seminar, it is free of charge. But then if you would like to give a small contribution, even a big contribution, you can do so by banging in to STM. Later, Haiyan is going to show the same slide again, but I want to record a word of thanks to every one of you who are present here today. And right now, I want to ask Dr. Chong, our principal, to close us in prayer.
Yeah. Let's come to God in prayer. Lord, your word is precious and wonderful. Your word is profound and mysterious. Sometimes we just yearn for it and want to fathom everything about it. We thank you for the Holy Spirit who guide us so that we can come near to you through the understanding of your word, and you reveal your words to us. Lord, we give you thanks even in this seminar as we share with one another and we engage with one another, and our minds meet and we try to be able to understand your word from different perspectives, and thus getting to know you even more. May the truth reveal to us through your words. We give you thanks for this meeting today. Pray that you be with us in the days after. Give you thanks and praise you in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.
Thank you. Okay, let me share the slide then. Yeah, okay. So thanks everyone for your participation and also for coming in to join us in this seminar. We hope to see you in future. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Dr. Chong, for closing us in prayer. Thank you once again. Okay, for everyone. Okay.
Thanks, Kayam.
Yeah.
Ian, Victor.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Look, thank you, Ezra.